We are making baseball history this year. For the first time ever, the DH is coming to the National League. Might just be a one-year thing, maybe not. I know DJ's busted up about that. DJ Short and Drew Silva, my friends from Rotoworld. We're going to get into some players this may benefit. But first, Drew, kind of overall, how does this change how you may draft, how you look at some of these teams and players?
Well, yeah, I've said this like every time this topic has come up throughout this whole thing, but it can be a trap, I think, to think too simply when it comes to the DH. Like, oh, you just plug in a huge slugger who's going to provide a ton of power production all of a sudden. But the guys you think of in that vein, like David Ortiz and Edgar Martinez and Nelson Cruz and JD Martinez among active players, those guys are pretty rare. And NL teams haven't had time to prepare for this. So they're not all locked and loaded with great options for the DH spot. That said, there are some teams who are better prepared and some situations that do stick out for fantasy purposes.
All right, so DJ, do not think too simply about this. We'll start with the NL East. Who can you pinpoint there who might get a few more at-bats helped out by this DH?
Howie Kendrick is the top for me. I think he's someone that maybe over a full year, if he was a regular and had to play second base or first base, he could be a durability risk. We've seen some injuries in recent seasons. He's getting a little bit up there in age, but you look at the numbers he put up last year, both in the regular season and the postseason, he was fantastic. He hit 344, had 17 homers and 966 OPS over just 370 plate appearances. So having that spot that he can be in most of the time, maybe he'll play some first base on occasion, maybe some second base. I think that's going to be huge. We really didn't know what kind of role he was going to play, which made it a little tough to pick him up in drafts this spring. But now that we know that there's going to be a DH, I think his value is definitely going up.
So you guys also mentioned, I listened to your podcast, Jay Bruce. It seemed like he might be the odd man out in Philadelphia. It looks like he'll have maybe a little bit more role now. How about the Central there, Drew?
Oh, I mean, the Reds are probably more prepared for this than any National League team. It's almost like they knew the universal DH was coming somehow with all the outfield bats they have, plus Mike Moustakas. Nick Senzel is sort of a placeholder for me right now in that graphic for what will likely be a DH rotation of those outfielders plus Moustakas. So Nick Senzel, Nick Castellanos, Shogo Akiyama, Jesse Winker, and maybe Aristides Aquino, though he's not going to be at Great American Ballpark for the Reds player pool. He'll be at an auxiliary site. But I love Mike. I love Nick Castellanos. I loved him going into the year, and I like him even more now. I think all those outfielders get a boost. Senzel, maybe he finally arrives. Akiyama, an addition from Japan, who has a lot of on base ability and could set the table for that lineup. I think the Reds are really well prepared for this. And the Brewers stick out too with Ryan Braun. Braun's 36 years old, but he was productive last year when he was in the lineup. 285 batting average, 22 home runs and 459 at bats. Also had 11 steals. So they can stick him at DH and start Christian Yelich and Lorenzo Cain and Avisel Garcia in the outfield. I liked the Avisel Garcia pickup for Milwaukee. He had a nice 2019 with the Rays and now gets to hit at Miller Park, which is really homer friendly. It just extends their lineup like it does for the Reds and like it will do for a lot of NL teams.
The NL West, I think, guys, is fascinating because you have some GMs, some teams who think similarly. They have built their rosters with a lot of versatility. And so it seems like they may have, DJ, a whole lot more options than even teams in the American League who could fill that spot.
Yeah, I think the Dodgers are really well prepared for this. If you remember when they traded for Mookie Betts, it seemed like Jock Peterson was on the way out, but it could actually work out nicely for the Dodgers that Jock could be an option out of the DH spot. I think they're going to use a rotation here for sure. Like Drew was saying, like you really can't think about this too simply. Like Peterson's not going to be in there every day necessarily, but they could shuffle guys in and out. I think something that makes sense, a scenario would be to give Justin Turner a few days a week in the DH spot. He's been a durability concern in recent years. So sticking to him in there makes a lot of sense, but they could really give a ton of guys days off or, get Max Muncy, off first base certain days and move guys around. Will Smith, keep his bat in the lineup at the DH. So there's a lot the Dodgers could do. I think the Rockies are really fascinating. Daniel Murphy, as we know, he's been a durability concern. So they could put him in the DH spot and really change their lineup up. They could put Ryan McMahon at first base, They could put Garrett Hampson, who has a lot of speed at second base, or even Brendan Rodgers, who we've been waiting for him to get his opportunity. So they have a ton of options there too.
Yeah, the idea of a DH at Coors Field is just like really titillating, like for both teams playing there on any given day. I think with, you know, pitchers being eased into action this spring, the early scores at Coors Field could be just like nuts. Like we're talking 17-15 final scores.
And before we go, DJ, I saw you do this when we started. Do you think we ever see a pitcher bat again outside of a random occurrence?
I'm sure Madison Bumgarner's going to want to hit again. So we could see some pinch hitting appearances this year.
Yeah. All right, guys. Good insights, some players who may be helped by some baseball history this year in the National League. Well done, guys.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.